Morning everybody. Today we're working on a 2007 Ford F-150 with the infamous 5.4 liter 3-valve Triton engine. These engines are pretty well known for having timing issues and also for the spark plugs breaking off when you try and change them. At least the factory version from something like 05 to 07. 08 I believe they had it fixed from the factory. They had a different design plug that you didn't have issues with. And also in the aftermarket, you can get the revised, better plug to put back into the older engines. Anyway, this truck's in here today for the other problem, a timing issue. The owner wants the timing set replaced, the timing chains, tensioners, guides, and the VVT sprockets and VVT solenoids. I'm gonna go ahead and start the truck up now. It's been sitting here cold for probably 15-20 minutes. So I'm gonna start it up now and let you listen to the timing set. So you should have noticed on that initial startup, it had quite a bit of rattle to it. The longer it sits, the worse that rattle is when it first starts. You probably heard on the second start that rattle was gone. That's mostly because the tensioners that hold tension against the chain were bled off. There was a lot of slack in the timing chain. The first time we started it, that was all the rattling you heard till that slack got taken out of it. The second time, the tensioners had not bled off very much yet, so it still had a little bit of tension on the chains, and therefore there wasn't a bunch of noise the second time. So we're gonna rip into it. I'm not gonna have you watch step by step. It would be a 8-hour video if we did that. But I'm gonna start taking stuff apart a little at a time, bring you back in to take a look at what we're doing and what we need to do next. Okay, so really the first couple things we need to do is start digging down to the engine. We need to get the valve covers off. We need to get the timing cover off the front of the engine. And to do that, we got to get some of this stuff out of the way. This air intake tube we've got to get off. The battery we're going to take out. Over here, the ECM and its bracket bolted back here to the firewall. We're going to take those out. We're going to have to drain the antifreeze because we're going to have to take the radiator hose off. Let's see what else. We're gonna have to take the power steering bracket off and just lay it over here out of the way. There's no need to drain that. We're gonna have to take the cooling fan off and then the wiring harnesses, unplug those. Usually I'll just lay those up over the airbox. The airbox itself you can leave alone. At least that's the way I've always done it in the past. So I'm gonna get busy starting to tear some of that stuff off of there. And like I said earlier, I will bring you back in here shortly when we have some more to look at. Making pretty good progress. As you can see, we got the fan and the fan shroud off. A little tip for you. Leave the serpentine belt on until you get the fan broke loose. And you get these 4 bolts that hold the pulley to the water pump broke loose. Once all that's broke loose, then you can take the belt off, spin these 4 bolts out, take that pulley off. It's a whole lot harder to do, obviously, if you take the belt off first and then try and loosen all that stuff up. We've got the fan and the fan shroud have to come out together. You have to leave the fan in here and pull both of them up and out of the engine bay at the same time. To get the clutch hub, clutch nut broke loose, usually what I'll do is take an air hammer, go right here on one of these corners, kind of angle it, or just before the corner so you don't cut the corner off. And just give it a little tap, 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 and it will 99 times out of 100 break that loose, and then you can just use your hand and spin the fan by hand. Over here I've got the battery out, the battery tray out. I took the ECM out, took the bracket out. Now we can grab these ECM wires, use either a zip tie or a bungee cord, pull them over here out of the way. And the purpose of all this is to dig down to this passenger side valve cover so we can get it out. Driver side valve cover is not as big of a pain. We need to get this bracket out that holds the power steering reservoir. It's got a bolt or a nut down here by the power steering pump. 2 nuts up here. We need to get this out of the way. the PCV tube here. We'll get it out of the way, and then we'll start unplugging the wiring harnesses for spark plugs and fuel injectors. Normally I'll take the coils out as well on both sides. And like I said, this wiring harness here, you can just kind of lay up over the air box while you're getting that valve cover off. Once you finally dig down to this one, same thing, take all the fuel injector wires, connectors off, spark plug, or I'm sorry, the ignition coil wiring, take all the ignition coils out, and then lay this up on the air cleaner as well. As far as on the front, what we need to do, once we get the belt off, we need to take the tensioner assembly off, 3 little bolts right here. We need to take idler pulley off. Need to take the water pump off, or I'm sorry, the water pump pulley off. Then valve covers. Then once we get all that off, I mean, you know, I say once we get that off, but it doesn't really matter what order you do them in. You can do valve covers first. You can do the front end stuff first. We're also going to need to take the harmonic balancer off. You're going to need a puller for that. Once we get all that stuff off and we get the valve covers off, then we can work on taking the timing cover off. What I do with the parts to keep them out of my way, as I'm taking them off, I'll lay them back here in the back of the truck. We've got the cover over the radiator and shroud. We've got the air intake hose, the battery box. Under here's the ECM and the bracket for that. So as I take those pulleys off, you want to keep them on the side of the engine that they go on. So the driver's side pulley I'll lay here, the passenger side pulley I'll lay over here, and then that way when I come to the back of the truck during reassembly, I can just grab from that side of the bed and I know what side of the truck it went on, or what side of the engine. Really, that only applies to the pulleys up here as far as I can think of at the moment. You know, valve covers are going to be easy to remember what goes on what side because your oil fill is over here on the passenger side. Nuts, you know, that hold brackets on and stuff like that. There was a bracket here that held the radiator hose, and then there was another bracket on top of that that held this wiring for the fan clutch down here. So once I get all that stuff off, this bracket here, once I get all that stuff off, I'll put the nuts back on the stud. I have to take the nuts back off the stud to get the stud itself out, but once I do, I put those nuts back on it. Another good idea is to take a picture of, you know, stud locations before you take things apart. Like we know one needs to go back in here, and that's a stud that holds the timing cover on. We know one of the studs needs to go there. We know one of the studs needs to go there. Sometimes, yeah, this one does. It feels like, maybe not. Sometimes they have a stud over here on this corner. So once you do a few of them, you'll kind of remember where that stuff goes. But if it's your first one, take pictures. You know, basically where I have the camera looking at right now, take a picture of that. It can help you with belt routing in the future. It can help you with the stud locations, brackets. Good idea. So we'll keep ripping and tearing here, and we'll be back in a few minutes. All right, we're making some progress. We got the driver's side valve cover off. Working on the passenger side here, I've got the wiring unhooked. I've got the harness and everything bungee corded up out of the way. I need to go down and get the coils off, get that valve cover off. At that point, we can pull the harmonic balancer and get the timing cover off. This engine's pretty gunked up. You can see some of it in there. I'll try and get this light propped up here somewhere so I can point for you. You can see down there, like down in this area on the bottom row, you can see some of the sludge and stuff laying in there. If I can get you around here. Yeah, you can see it pretty good there. That comes from not changing your oil very often enough, or thermostat not open, or excuse me, thermostat staying open, engine not getting up to temperature. But you can see in the valve cover it's really bad. I started scraping a little bit right here. We need to try and get as much of this out of here as we can while we've got it apart. Kind of the risk you run is if you break this stuff loose and it starts filling up the oil pan, that can get up inside of the pickup screen on the oil pump and really cause some problems. But yeah, you can tell whoever owned this in the past. You know, I don't know if it's the guy that owns it now, or he didn't buy the truck new, of course. So, but somewhere in its past, somebody hasn't been taking care of it very well, at least changing the oil very often. All right, more progress. Both valve covers are off. The timing cover's off, as you can see. Not as much carnage in here as I've seen in the past. These are the timing chain guides. There's one on each side. These 5.4s have two timing chains on them, just like the 4.6 and the 6.8 V10. They've got two timing chains, one that goes to the driver's side here and one that goes to the passenger side over here. They had these plastic things here, which are guides and tensioners. This is an oil pressure tensioner. Oil comes in the backside of this, pushes this little rod out against the tensioner, which pushes pressure against the chain. What happens is the guides get broke off. Like you can see, this guide is missing all in this area. There's a piece broke off and gone. And you can see the slack that comes in the chain, and that's the slapping sound you hear when the vehicle's first started. The more it slaps, the more it breaks off, and it just gets kind of snowballs, gets worse and worse until bad things happen. So the next step, we're going to roll the engine around to the proper position where we want everything. Then we're going to take all these guides and tensioners off, as well as the variable valve timing sprockets, the cam sprockets. So once we get all that done, we'll be back. We'll lay the new parts next to the old parts and kind of get an idea of what we're looking at. So a tip of how to turn the engine over when you're in this spot where you've got the harmonic balancer off of it, the bolt out of it, and so forth. Take a socket that will fit over the snout of the crank. Leave the keyway in the crank. This one's on the bottom, so you can't see it at the moment. But take a socket that fits over the snout of the crank, and it will grab that keyway, and then you can use your ratchet to spin the engine over just like that. This particular socket is a 1.25 inches. But it fits over there nice. It's just slightly loose, but that's fine. It's plenty snug enough to spin the engine over. All right, so everything's disassembled here. We've got the old sprockets, timing chain, and guides, the old VVT solenoids, and the VVT tensioners. So something to look at on these old tensioners. This is the surface where it meets the block, and oil pressure comes from a hole in the block into here, pushes this piston out against the tensioner arm, which puts tension on the chain. This is more or less like a flat paper gasket that went around here from the factory, and you can see it's missing in this area right here by my thumb. Right in this area, you can see that gasket is missing. Over through here, the gasket's still intact. That's very common on these, and that's what begins the process of this failure. That piece of gasket blows out. Now, instead of oil pressure being only in here and pressing on that piston, some oil pressure and oil can leak out of that gap right there, which lowers the pressure in here, doesn't push that out as hard, doesn't put as much tension on the chain. The chain gets a little bit of slack in it. It starts moving around just a little bit. Eventually, that beating and banging will start breaking this guide. This is the new guide, this is the old guide. You can see this part right here of the guide is broke off of this one. And what happens to it from there, you know, sometimes you'll find that big chunk laying in the oil pan. Sometimes it will get caught up in the chain and just kind of ground into powder. It's really hard to tell. But as I said earlier, the more that chain slaps around, the more these start to get broke off. The looser the chain gets, the more it flops. You can see this end, it broke the mount off of it. So that's the way it goes. That's what starts this whole process. Again, on this other tensioner from the other side, you can see, again, gaps broke out of that paper gasket. The new tensioners have a rubber gasket that is molded into the tensioner itself. So these work a lot better, a lot less likely that that's going to get blown out just from pressure. These are also side specific. Like you can see, this one has an R on it. for the right side. Now, it gets confusing because as you're standing here looking at the engine working on it, this side is on your right, but the way they're marked is from the typical way you refer to left and right of an engine is standing behind it, or easier to think of, sitting in the driver's seat. So if I'm sitting in the driver's seat, this is the left side of the engine, that is the right side of the engine, even though they're swapped from side to side as I stand here and look at it. This is my left hand, over here is my right side. But you got to remember, all the left and right is done from inside, sitting in the seat. So this is the left side of the engine, that's the right side of the engine. You'll see this new tensioner has an L on it. Very important to put them on the correct side. Once we get all the timing stuff in there, we get everything bolted down and torqued, then we're going to pull this out of here, and that piston will pop out against a new tensioner and put tension on the new chains. Here's our new VVT sprockets. They come with new bolts. So once you take this old stuff off, the bolt goes with it. We've got new solenoids. They're here. They also come with a new gasket that goes in the valve cover to seal them up good. This is a tool that you're going to need to hold these sprockets in place while you torque the bolt, while you loosen the old bolt or while you torque the new bolt back down. These bolt in place of where the timing cover went. So like on this side, you'll use these two bolts. It will actually go like this on this side, the driver's side. And these little teeth will engage with the sprocket and hold it so you can torque the bolt here in the center that holds it onto the camshaft. So that's where we're at right now. We're gonna do some cleaning under the hood, start putting these new parts on, and we'll be back. A couple more things I wanted to show you here real quick. This is the part number of the kit that I'm using for this particular truck. Double check yours, you know, for a different year or whatever, you may have a different part number, but that's what I'm using. Good quality kit. And the one kit, everything I've shown you here, except the solenoids, they came separately. Everything else that I've shown you came in this kit. The one part number gets everything I've shown you except the solenoids. On the timing chains, they come with 3 colored links on each chain. And the reason for those is to line up with your timing marks. So the single colored link lines up with the dot on the crank, and the 2 colored links straddle the appropriate letter on the cam sprocket. So the cam sprockets are the same. They can be used on either side. The only difference is, you know, which letter is at the top based on which side of the engine it's on. So the L for the driver's side, or it has an R for the passenger side. Same thing, R and L on this one. But the chain's pretty neat because you can line the links up over the timing marks and be able to tell, yes, I have it in time, or no, I'm 1 tooth off, or whatever. So that's a pretty handy little thing. Again, watch your letters on your stuff that you're putting on. Make sure you're actually on the correct side of the engine. Okay, we got the new parts on. The new cam sprockets are put on, torqued down. The new chain guides are laid in place, bolted down, torqued down. The new chains are on. You want to make sure that your black mark on your timing chain, your one black link, lines up with the dot on the crank sprocket. And you want to make sure that the black marks are, let me get the light up here for you. You want to make sure that the 2 black links are straddling the timing mark on that bank, right? So I get the light to work with me. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's an arrow off that R that is in between those 2 black links. So we've got all that put together, everything torqued down. You want to triple and quadruple check that your marks are all lined up the way they're supposed to be. We put our tensioners in, torqued those down, pulled the pins on them. So now, if you remember earlier, this chain had slack in it where I could flop it up and down. Now, there's no slack at all. But both chains are good and snug right now. That should easily take care of our rattle on startup. We're in good shape now. We're going to go back, start cleaning on the timing cover, the inside of it, get as much of that gunk out as we can. And then it's just a matter of reassembly. Put the timing cover back on, put the valve covers back on. We had to unbolt the power steering pump and lay it to the side. These two bolts here on the front of it go into the timing cover. And there's also this bolt right here is behind the power steering pulley, or this one of the two. Yeah, this one down here I'm pointing at now is behind the power steering pulley when it's mounted up. So get everything cleaned up and start putting it back together. Lots of progress today, folks. Really all I've got left to do is put this bracket back on here. It goes here on the driver's side, front of the valve cover, holds the power steering reservoir. That's pretty much all I've got to do except for a test drive. Fan shroud, all that stuff back in. Obviously all those wires and everything put back up. We're filling it back up with antifreeze. But it's running great so far. We're nice and quiet. I've shut it off, let it sit, started it 3 or 4 times. No issues. If we come in here on the inside, no check engine light. Idle's nice and smooth. We got great oil pressure over there. So everything's doing good. We're getting it up to temperature. I'm gonna let it sit overnight, of course, and come out in the morning. We'll do a cold start video in the morning so we can see what it sounds like after it's sat all night and the oil pressures, or the oil is drained back into the pan and all that kind of stuff. So everything's going well. All right, everybody, it's morning. Stone cold out here. We're gonna go ahead and start it up, see what kind of noises it makes. Nice cold start. It's mid-50s in here in the shop right now, so we'll start it up, see what it sounds like. Still the same place I left the video off in the last segment. We've got this power steering bracket we need to put over here on top of the valve cover to hold the power steering reservoir. Once we're done with that, we need to change the oil, and as soon as we're done changing the oil, we can go on the test drive and hopefully we'll be done. So here we go with the cold start. So it actually sounds really good in person. I noticed during editing on that last time I had it running, it sounds like it's got a clicking to it in the video, but here in person it does not. It does have a slight exhaust leak at either the manifold or the donut gasket. But as far as internal engine noise, it is nice and quiet, super smooth. We've got really good oil pressure. Really good oil pressure. I mean, I know it's a cold start, but even after it's warmed up, it stays a little over halfway up the gauge. No check engine light or anything. So I'm gonna go ahead and shut it off, put that power steering bracket back on, change the oil, and we'll go for a ride. Okay, folks, so oil change is done. I think we're done under the hood. Just put all the tools away while they sat outside and idled. We're up to operating temperature. Fuel trims look good. No check engine light, so we're gonna go on a test drive. Okay, we're back from about a 35-mile test drive. No issues at all. No check engine light, no pending codes. Temperature's good, oil pressure's great. Truck runs well, so we've got it taken care of. I appreciate y'all watching. If you enjoyed this video, click like for me, comment on whatever you want. Subscribe and click the bell, please. That would help a lot with growing the channel, and also you'll get notified when I post new content, which I'm trying to do a lot more often. I appreciate y'all watching. Leave me comments, let me know what you want to see next. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.